War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few, at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. In World War I, a mere handful garnered the profits of conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains and their income taxes. How many other war millionaires falsified their tax returns? No one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights, ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust of an enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle? Out of war nations acquire additional territory if they are victorious. They just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few. The self-same few who wrung dollars out of the blood in the war. The general public shoulders the bill. That was Major General Smedley Butler from his book or pamphlet, War is a Racket. And this is AllMinucOne. My name is Bill. Please, if you like my content, hit that like button, share, or subscribe. Some people have their preferences of what you may like to do or don't do, but please share. If you don't know what this information is I'm about to share it with others. Get the word out, people. Let people know what is actually going on in the world today instead of what the propaganda media is showing you. So, let's see here. If you guys, what else do I got of my shameless plugging? If you guys want to watch a live show tonight, that is every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. over on DLive, ends_justify_memes. That is the ends justify the memes. I am live with a producer and co-host. If you miss that, but you want to watch, it's kind of a loose show. We have fun. The ends justify the memes replays over on YouTube. If you want to support me in any way, shape, or form, go over to Subscribestar. I don't have any tiers right now, but I start getting some people, I will start doing that. So let's talk about this quote I just read. This was from Major General Smedley Butler in his little pamphlet or book called War is a Racket. So if we read about Smedley Butler very briefly, it says that he retired on October 1st, 1931. He was on a leave of absence as Director of Deputy of Safety from Philadelphia in 1932. He was a lecturer, Republican candidate for senator in 1932, and he died at the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia in 1940. Now, I as a Marine know who Smedley Butler is because he was one of two individuals who have won 2 Medal of Honors. So he is very well known amongst the Marine Corps. If you ask any Marine who were the 2 Marines to win 2 Medal of Honors, they will tell you Dan Dailey and Smedley Butler. But Butler was known also very much so after the war for his acts working with veterans, because after the First World War, these men were used up and abused, and the government did not take very good care of them. And then we entered the Great Depression. So here we can see that he was in many military conflicts: the Spanish-American War, the Philippine-American War, the Boxer Rebellion, which is where he won a Medal of Honor, the Banana Wars, Honduras, And then it says he went marriage and business, Central America, Veracruz, Mexico, first Medal of Honor, and so forth. Now, I bring this all up because what is not generally talked about with Smedley Butler, and something I did not know until long after I met the Marine Corps, is that he actually stopped a totalitarian regime from infiltrating the government, or supposedly stopped. He exposed it. But we're going to get into that in this, conspiracy theory that is no theory, but in fact, a fact that was researched and talked about within Congress. There were congressional hearings, and I'm going to let the man speak for himself.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans, to use as a bluff, or as a club at least, to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government. I talked with an investigator for this committee who came to me with a subpoena on Sunday, November 18th. He told me they had unearthed evidence linking my name with several such veteran organizations. As it then seemed to me to be getting serious, I felt it was my duty to tell all I knew of such activities to this committee. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech, and press.
Isn't that interesting? No dictatorship if we have suffrage, that is, voting rights, freedom of speech, and press. Well, freedom of speech has been highly curtailed here recently. The press is not free. We do have a free press per se, but the press is not free from influence from its handlers within the DNC and to some degree within the RNC. And as far as voting rights go, well, there has been a whole issue with voting rights this year and the mail-in ballots, which are not the same as requested absentee ballots. And then, of course, the Democrats have created this whole truly crazy conspiracy theory about the post office, which is just absurd because the post office has been in decline for 3 decades. But I digress. I will get to some of those points here in a bit. What I do want to cover is this actual coup. Here from the website counterpunch.org. This was from 2011. Again, I like older articles because they tend to be less postmodern, less nonsense. So this is the Wall Street's failed 1934 coup. In the last few weeks of the committee's official life, it received evidence showing that certain persons had made an attempt to establish a fascist organization in this country. There is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. That is the report from the McCormick Dickenstein Committee. Now, that committee was within the federal government. Understand as well, people understood the nature of fascism in their day, that it was closely associated with socialism and communism. They knew this then because they did not have years and years of communist propaganda to subvert that idea. If you listen to many people of the day, they liked fascism to some degree, because it wasn't full-on communism, but had some of those socialistic controls. People to include FDR, the president of this time. people to include George Orwell, who, if you read certain essays, particularly praises men like Hitler. But we have become blind, deaf, and dumb to our history. So we do not know these things, and we have been given nothing but agit prompt for the last 100 years. So you know the coup plot that they teach all young Americans about in 10th grade history class? Oh, yeah? So I don't know if he's being sarcastic there, but I never learned this in school. I don't ever recall learning this in school, and I actually feel like I had a rather fair, though somewhat statist, education. It says, in November 1934, famed double Medal of Honor winner Marine General Smedley Butler gave secret testimony before the McCormick-Dickinson Committee to precursor to the House Committee on the Un-American Activities. In it, Butler told of a plot headed by a group of wealthy businessmen, the American Liberty League, to establish a fascist dictatorship in America, complete with a concentration camps for Jews and other undesirables. And that's what would make it fascist. In their mind, at least. Show me the money. Butler had been approached by Gerald P. McGuire of Wall Street's Grayson M.P. Murphy and Company. McGuire claimed they had assembled an army of 500,000 mostly unemployed World War I veterans and marched on D.C. The plutocrats, that is of Plato's Republic, wanted Butler to lead the coup, thinking that, like the Bolsheviks, taking one major city, D.C., as Petrograd, would lead to the fall of the government. They promised to put $3 million as starter and dangled, they promised to put up $3 million as a starter and dangled a future $300 million as bait. Butler went along with the plot until he could learn the identities of all the schemers. And this was a noble thing for General Butler, because he essentially stayed in there. I've done this before in my life. Sometimes you got to put up with some stuff, stay in there, and to get to the bottom of it, to expose it. I'm not a dishonest person, but when someone's trying to scam me or be dishonest, I'll play dumb sometimes for a bit, and just so I can call them out on it and expose what is evil to the light. So it says, not one of them was ever called to testify or was charged with treason. Virtually all of them were founding members of the Council of Foreign Relations. Founding members of the Council of Foreign Relations. Now, you need to understand that all of our foreign policy that dictates war is based in the Council of Foreign Relations. All of our foreign policy, which dictates global decrees, global governance, global pacts, is from the Council of Foreign Relations. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you think you are on. This is a reality. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. Dick Cheney himself talked about being back at the Council of Foreign Relations, giving a speech saying when he was running that he didn't talk about that he was glad to be back in their hands. These people are globalists. The problem that people have in the current governmental system with Donald Trump is that he is not a warmonger and he is not a globalist. And he wants to bring back American jobs and American sovereignty. So they call him Nazi. They call him Hitler. They call him all kinds of names because they know that many of you are too stupid to understand anything deeper or better than what your emotional being brings about, whatever your persona is and whatever else. Let's read further. The League was headed by the DuPont and J.P. Morgan cartels and had major support from Andrew Mellon Associate, Pew, Sun Oil, Rockefeller Association. David Rockefeller was the head of the CFR for a very long time. E.F. Hutton Associates, U.S. Steel, General Motors, Chase, Standard Oil, and Goodyear Tires. Money was funneled through the Senate, through Senator Prescott Bush. led Union Banking Corporation. Yes, those Bushes. And Prescott Bush led Brown Brothers Harriman. Yes, the Harriman of the League, and to Hitler. But that's another story. The plotters bragged about Bush's Hitler connection and even claimed that Germany had promised Bush that they would provide material for the coup. This claim was entirely believable a year earlier. Chevrolet President William S. Cunninson, who himself had donated $10,000 to the League. By the way, in 1933, $10,000 was way more than what it's worth now. Way more. Probably something like 8 times more. Went to Germany and met with Nazi leaders and declared upon his return that Hitler's Germany was the miracle of the 20th century at the time. GM's wholly owned Atom Opel Corp company had already begun producing the Nazi tanks, trucks, bombers, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about the White Lash. While the committee found that General Butler was telling the truth, discrediting such a stalwart was problematic for the plotters. Quickly, the corporate press weighed in and sought to raise doubts about the war hero, settling on branding him naive. The discredited Cunninson meme was, "It was all idle cocktail party chatter." This red herring was trumpeted under the Associated Press headline, "The Cocktail Pinshot New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia dismissed the plot as someone at the party had suggested the idea to an ex-Marine as a joke." And then this article goes forward. So, business as usual, folks. Nothing has changed. I can guarantee you, General Butler, being the man who he was, did not at all decide to expose this as some kook or crackpot. This was real. There were real hearings. The reason why people weren't indicted on this is because they already infiltrated your government. It talked about Prescott Bush. We all know the Bush family legacy. So here, Arcadia Publishing. Smedley Butler in the 1930s plot to overthrow the president. In 1934, a colossal claim reached the American news media. There had been a plot to overthrow President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in favor of a fascist government. Supposedly in the works since 1933, the claim of the conspiracy came from a very conspicuous and reliable source, Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated war heroes of his time. Even more unbelievable were his claims of those who were involved in the plot. So again, it lists the names: Robert Sterling, Clark, Grayson and P. Murphy, and Prescott Bush. And it says, who's Smedley Butler? And it talks about the business plot. After leaving the service, Butler held many roles, but became best known for his activism. Butler's various accolades made him a household name following World War I. He was well known among veteran circles as a champion of veterans' rights. This included supporting the so-called Bonus Army, a large group of veterans and veteran supporters who lobby Congress for payments of bonds issued to veterans prior to the war. The positive public image and a demonstrated ability to rally people under his leadership were perhaps the reason why Butler was approached by Gerald C. McGuire and Bob Dole in 1933. Bob Doyle, not Bob Dole, in 1933. McGuire, a bond salesman, and Doyle were members of the American Legion, an organization meant to support veteran rights opportunities. Did I say league earlier? Sorry if I misspoke, guys. That's that dyslexia comes out. I don't even know it. But the American Legion, we all know what the American Legion is, right? So again, this article goes on. I got another one. This is from muckrocks.com. There's old Smedley. The General, the FBI, and the fascist plot to overthrow democracy that nobody cared about. Smedley, Darlington Butler's final documents and the Bureau's disinterest in the business plot. Why? Why were they just interested? Well, I can tell you why. Because this was the beginnings. It started a little bit before this, the 1880s, really. Maybe even a little bit before the 1880s. But as I showed you the other day about Labor Day, this business, government, and then union ties all started building together for us to no longer have a constitutional government. Here at this point in time in the United States, we were not on a gold standard anymore. That is unconstitutional. The president, FDR, confiscated gold by executive order. That was unconstitutional. The things that he continued to do that were unconstitutional were opposed by people in the Supreme Court, and they were trying to say, no, you can't do this. And then he threatened to stack the court because there is nothing in the Constitution about how many people are supposed to be on the Supreme Court. That was something they kind of made up as they went along. Well, this is quite funny. As hordes of white men with dopey haircuts take to the streets to denounce progress, it's worth taking a look at a moment in American history when a bunch of rich dudes attempted to turn the country into a fascist dictatorship through overt violence before they realized they could just hijack the electoral system. In 1934, Smedley Butler reported to the FBI that he'd been approached by leaders of the American Legion to lead 500,000 men into battle against FDR's government and install a dictatorship. Although Butler was a hero of multiple American wars, at the time it was the most decorated Marine in history. I believe he still is. Perhaps the alleged conspirators thought that it was safe to approach him because he'd since declared that war was a racket. It says the press was all over the story, and yet they try to. It says here, McGuire vehemently denied having any part of the plot. Here's some more old newspaper clippings. McGuire was a World War I veteran, Wall Street bond salesman, and former commander of the American Legion's Connecticut branch. Grayson Miller, Provost Murphy, who was McGuire's employer, had connections with numerous businesses. It was also named by Butler as a conspirator. In another newspaper interview, McGuire was described as plaintive, claiming that he was blindsided by the accusations from the man he said thought was a friend. It goes on and on and on. McCormick contacted the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover about the matter. McCormick received a response from Hoover just a few months later saying that, as far as he could tell by the facts put forth in Green's letter, no federal laws had been broken and he didn't see the need to take any action. Here's the correspondence. Oddly enough, an FOAI request for the files on McGuire turned up a no responsive document. That is a Freedom of Information Act. Even though the file the FBI released on the Butler made numerous references to McGuire. The wealthy folks who had committed to funding the plot, McGuire holding the bag just as he claimed to have warned Butler. They due to him just 1 month after the McCormick-Dickenstein Committee released its final report. McGuire died of natural causes at the age of 37. Even after the investigation ended and most people had moved on, some people were unsettled by the fact that nobody was held accountable for the plot. There were accusations that the McCormick-Dickenstein Committee had been less than rigorous in its investigation. According to a letter dating to 1935 and addressed to President Roosevelt, E.C. Rockwick of Santa Barbara, California, suggested that the committee suppressed evidence that pointed to financial leadership of Wall Street having supported an alleged attempt at the fascist coup. Here is that letter. As for Butler, he went on with his life, and the incident doesn't seem to have dulled his affection for the Bureau. In the 1940s, Hoover and his agents exchanged letters with Butler, thanking him for the lovely things he said about the Bureau and various speaking engagements. So again, Butler was a company man, but he was an honest man by all accounts, and a man of the people. He is what we would call, back in the day, a statesman. See, we just talked about politicians today, but Butler was a statesman. He knew how to deal with the people. He wasn't an elitist. And when elitists came to him, he said, no way, I'm not doing this. Says in 1961, Hoover received a newspaper clipping from someone whose name had been redacted, which quotes Butler as a young Marine saying that he was a high-class muscle man for big business in Wall Street. Hoover did not seem interested. So that is pretty much that. Go look this up yourself, people. Don't take my word for it. Doesn't matter if I'm showing it to you. Here's another one. This is from Timeline.com. These Wall Street millionaires literally plotted to overthrow the president. So, again, I'm not going to go through all the details. It gets into this. Let's see. A second meeting with McGuire, $150 a week bond salesman for financier Grayson and P. Murphy, proposed Butler bring along a few hundred veterans for support and showed him bank statements amounting to $106,000 to pay for their travel expenses. A skeptical Butler surmised that no coalition of veterans could have gathered those funds. Adding to his bemusement was the speech they wanted him to deliver. It lacked populist pro-veteran rhetoric and read heavily as a screed in favor of the gold standard, a policy which FDR had suspended about a month earlier. Again, Butler was a company man. The gold standard, as Butler subsequently research would uncover, was a major concern for the country's wealthiest citizens. Bankers especially did not want to be paid back on their gold-backed loans with cheaper, ever-inflating paper. Keynesian economics be damned to the capital interest of the country. A break from gold meant ravaging the nation's wealth and savings. That's actually true. That's actually what happened. Overnight, 2/3 of Americans' wealth disappeared, of any American, and then all gold was confiscated. Didn't matter who you were. Back then, for about 150 years until this point, gold was worth about $20 per ounce. Now, I haven't looked at the price of gold recently, but it's been pretty steady, somewhere between about $12,000 and, not $12,000, $1,200 and $2,000 per ounce. That's a lot of inflation. That's about 100 times inflation. So that was one of the worst things that ever happened to America. So at this point, Butler knew McGuire was taking orders from someone and requested to speak to the chain of command. Now, here's the thing, is that the gold standard, I don't know if I agree with this. Keynesian economics and the gold standard is what FDR did. It's what prolonged the Great Depression. All the regulations, all the centralized government, all the essentially fascistic takeover from their administration. This happened because the advisors were businessmen and the people in the government thought, well, they could do better. Before that, before the income tax and before the Federal Reserve Bank, America's money was relatively stable, only destabilized during periods of war, primarily the Civil War. So, again, there are examples of it fluctuating, but if you want to see a fluctuation of an ounce of gold between $18 and $22 for 150 years versus $18 and $22 versus $2,000 now for an ounce of gold, don't tell me it's not devalued. This hyperinflation began in the 70s after Nixon decided to completely get rid of the gold standard. And, you know, we've never repaired from this. It's going to catch up with us eventually. And the way we keep spending currently, it will continue to catch up with us. So, again, there's a lot here. I don't really want to go through this whole article per se, just to show you this is another perspective, a little bit deeper dive. Here are some things. This is from November 20th, 1934, originally published, I suppose. But maybe that just is the date. This is a two-part article. The editor goes over some critiques, gets into the testimonies. This is from libertarianism.org. There is a part 2. So, again, I believe that's the date that this was actually exposed. Here is from the National Archives of the Legislative Branch. This is the Nazi and other propaganda, the records from the select committees of the House and Representatives. This is from 1910 to 1946. There's no major mention in here. Of course, we could go through all of the detailed documentation. Interestingly, if you go down to wikisource.org, it talks about this McCormick-Dickenstein committee. It talks about the business plot against FDR. It was alleged conspiracy brought to light by a retired general involving moneyed interest who intended to overthrow FDR during the years of the Great Depression. These guys probably thought that they were going to bring the United States out of the Great Depression. At the same time, they saw that they couldn't let their businesses be infiltrated by the government. And that's what was going on. It was a struggle between the government and the businesses. You know who won this argument? The businesses. It's still going on today. It's what a lot of our endowment, our national endowment foundations are. Like I said, the Council of Foreign Relations. It's where we have this globalist government, because these people do exert a lot of power. Now, I'm not saying that rich people are all evil, or they all exert this kind of power, or they all do these kind of things. But let's look at, let's say, currently with the evil coof that 99.9% of all people are going to survive, or maybe 98%. Don't misquote me, people. I'm being a little hyperbolic. But you have people like Bill Gates going around saying, "Oh, this is a great opportunity. Now I get to vaccinate everybody. I think the world's overpopulated. That's why we need to vaccinate everybody." Well, what sense does that make? And those are his words. Maybe he misspoke, but it doesn't seem to be a misspeak when he seems to fantasize about these things and gleefully in public light. So my point here is that, yeah, these people couldn't get away with this, but it's because they already had deep connections within the government. The government was already becoming fascistic. It's just that it was not in the Nazi kind of way. It was not totalitarian. It did let Americans kind of live and be free. It just took all their wealth. It took every ounce of wealth from them and started controlling major businesses, and allowed the farming industry in the United States to be completely subsidized, and essentially because of its subsidies and wage and price controls. We talked about this the other day, why fascism is socialism. It's just a different form, with those wage and price controls taking over the agricultural industries, basically made them government run. During the Great Depression, in order to prop up the prices for farmers, they burned crops and slaughtered thousands and thousands of animals, hundreds of thousands, literally. So this was to keep farmers in business and employed, which they would have been anyways. But what it really did is it kept people starving and poor. See, everything they did worked backwards. And today you still have morons who are brainwashed, who will sit there and say, "Oh no, FDR got us out of the Great Depression." Here's a guy I used to shoot pool with. I really liked. He was an older gentleman. I knew one of his daughters, actually separately. But really nice guy. And he grew up. He was pretty young during the Depression, so he just thought FDR was the bee's knees, and he couldn't argue with the guy. I mean, he was, in his 70s. He's pretty spry still. Had his brain. Was a pretty good shot at pool. Had most of the color in his hair. Super nice guy. And what do you do with that? What do you do when people are obsessed like that? I remember shortly after I got out of the Marine Corps, I was doing a family thing with my in-laws, and I was talking to some people, and at the time, I had been uh, exposed to things like this and becoming very libertarian minded, changing my stance on war, understanding different things, talking to friends who were still in combat and doing horrible things that did not feel right about what they were doing. Now I know some of that. I mean, there's different approaches to that. I'm not saying that there weren't bad guys over there. There certainly were. It's the greater question of what about the civilian populace who aren't involved? Why is America involved in these things? Why are we doing what we're doing? And then is this a greater thing towards some sort of one world globalist government, which by all evidence it absolutely is, and you are just willfully blind if you do not see that. This has been going on for so long, and they openly talk about it. There is no theory, people. It is only facts. Only facts. In any case, my point is I was talking to some in-laws, and I didn't really know this lady, but she was older, and I was just like talking about how we have interfered in the Middle East for so long, and there's a reason why that people in the Middle East, in a lot of nations at least, have fear and hatred of us and would attack us. And they're like, so you were saying 9/11's our fault? I'm like, no, not at all. I've had several people jump down my throat about this. But I'm like, you have to look toward motivation. It's like the idea of the Hatfields and the McCoys. You know, if I go kill your brother randomly and then you kill me back, and then my family goes, you killed my son, you killed my husband, you killed whatever, I'm going to take revenge on your family. You go, well, but you killed my brother first, or he did that. And it goes on and on and on and on forever. You have to break that cycle, people. We have to go beyond that. So, you know, as Christ said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. So anyways, once again, I digress. I wanted to get down here into the contents because one thing that was important was deleted text. And it talks about the committee deleted extensive excerpts relating to Wall Street financiers, including Guaranty Trust Director Grayson Murphy, J.P. Morgan, DuPont Interest, Remington Arms, and others allegedly involved in the plot attempt. Even today, in 1975, a full transcript of the hearings cannot be traced. Well, let's look at that. It says Chapter 10, FDR, the man on the White House. So you can go look that up. This is I guess, a book here in the research done from that book. It says journalist John L. Spivak, researching Nazism and anti-Semitism for New Mess magazine, got permission from Dickenstein to examine the HUAC's public documents and was, it seemingly unwittingly, given the unexpungerated, that's a word, what wasn't expunged, testimony amid stacks of other papers, which he printed. Text and read is deleted excerpts from the congressional records as reported by Spivak. Click to see the detail on the first page, part 1. Let's do that real quick. Let's see what comes up here. Boy. It's about some witnesses and whatever else. Page 2. Seems pretty basic. But again, guys, I'm not going to cover all of this stuff. I just kind of wanted to show you that this happened in America, and this subversive deep state that we talk about today started in these days, and actually before that. So that brings me to today, and this ridiculous stuff that has been coming out. This has been coming out for over 2 months now. But the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. Donald Trump, he's so evil. He's the worst. He doesn't want us to be in wars. He doesn't want globalism for the United States. He wants to have our nation to be strong and have strong patriotism for people to be free. Man, he's such a dictator. Get out of here. What's the worst that could happen? The election will likely spark violence and a constitutional crisis. That's September 3rd. I'm not going to read this. This is all over the place. This is a bunch of crap. National Pulse. So this is right-leaning, Washington Post, left-leaning, Jeff Bezos, by the way. Exclusive, so-called bipartisan transition. Integrity Project funder sent thousands to Biden campaign. And then that's just their ties. The Integrity Project is about how are we going to have this peaceful transition? Well, again, right now there are people within the government saying, oh, we can't have this. Why do you think the government has been after Donald Trump for so long? Like, I don't understand why people just don't see this. And I guess they don't see it's because they're blind to it, because they don't think it's all sunshine and rainbows to them. It's a lot easier to have trust in your government, which you shouldn't. You never should. If you do, it's because it's a government of integrity. And obviously, we don't have a government of integrity. If you think Barack Obama had integrity, you are just a fool. An absolute fool. Do you think George Bush had integrity? You're a fool. I mean, come on. We know Bill Clinton doesn't have any integrity. Anyways, it says the left secretly preps for MAGA violence after Election Day. So this is from the Daily Beast. And this is from just yesterday, September 8th. Now, the funny thing about this is who's been violent in the streets, people? Look, they've been trying to gaslight you for years. They tried to say that the Tea Party was violent. They tried to say, that it's white supremacists in the streets doing the rioting. No, these are all left-wingers. Like, if you paid attention to real news, if you didn't watch the propaganda spewed out of your TV, out of your idiot box, you might know what's going on. If you didn't read things like the Washington Post, if you looked beyond, if you found people like me who are just willing to go and dig deeper, because I just have to. I'm just infinitely curious. I must. If you find people like me or others, for instance, someone like Tim Pool, who is a great resource. You don't have to agree with Tim on everything. I don't either. But Tim has a pretty good, unique perspective from a self-made man who essentially has covered riots and things for years, come from a lefty anarchist perspective, has become moderate, still a left-winger because he likes social democracy, that social intervention, believes in those things. I don't really believe in those things. I think that is a privatized issue. It certainly is constitutionally. But anyways, dozens and dozens of other journalists who are online, who are truthful and honest. There are people on the left who are truthful and honest. And you're not going to see them mostly on TV. You're not going to see them in mainstream media. And I know why so many people are brainwashed. Because they watch that idiot tube. The left secretly preps for MAGA violence after Election Day. So they have war games, right? We'll bring this up real quick. This is Tim Pool talking about this. I am not going to play the volume. I just want to bring this up. We're going to talk about these war games here. What if Trump loses but insists he won? Well, that's going to happen. This was 2 months ago, by the way. July 7th. I like this. So this is Democratic projection. I talk about projection all the time from this person right here. Democrats, 2016. If you lose, will you accept the loss? Trump said yes. Initially, he said no, and then they didn't. 2017. Not my president. 2018. Russian collusion. 2019. Impeach Russia, Ukraine. 2020. China, Trump is going to cheat. When people say I'm a Democrat these days, all I hear is I'm allergic to being accountable for my actions. Just found that was interesting. So there's this. What other articles does he cover here? Tim does cover the Democratic war games to some extent at some point or another. People like John Podesta were involved in, saying that they're going to have to do they're going to have to secede from the Union if Trump wins. They're going to have to come in with military force. Like, how crazy are you people? And how foolish are you who believe this? Do you really believe that these mail-in ballots, this is a good idea? the red mirage where Trump looks like he's going to win, but then weeks later Biden will have won. Well, I hate to tell you, but this was figured out a very, very long time ago. There is a deadline to when everything is going to be, it needs to be in constitutionally. Chris Ann Hall talks about this if you want to research some of her stuff. This is, I forget what it is. It's something like the second week in December. The ballots have to be in and done with. And as far as voter fraud and all that, it's real. It's been real. Tim covers it all the time. Like, I just want you to see, there's all kinds of articles here. Tim's a lefty. Tim is on the left, but he won't lie. He's not an ideologue. He won't lie. And because of that, that makes the far left see him as right wing. So for months, he has stuff. He talks about BLM, Boogaloo Boys, team up to defend the Second Amendment. That was actually beautiful. I talked about that. More people shot in Atlanta. Civil war has begun. We're in a cold civil war, people, with some skirmishes. We're not in a full-on civil war yet, but that is what the Democrats, high-level Democrat officials, are talking about right now. This isn't because the Democrats are a monolith as far as the people. It's because the Democrats are the establishment. They are the businesses. They are this whole business plot that Smedley Butler uncovered almost 100 years ago. They realized that they couldn't do that, and they couldn't trust people like that to do a full-on march. And so they did it subversively over time. So here's Tim's other channel, Voter Fraud. This was a month ago. Gets exposed. Let's see. Biden calls to transform America. Election results. Go insane. All this stuff. Democratic City rocked by motor fraud. Voter fraud charges. Over and over and over again. If you are watching MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, any of those, you're getting propaganda. If you're watching Fox News, you're getting right-wing propaganda. But honestly, right-wing propaganda tends to be more factual. I hate to say it, but it does. Like I say, Paul Joseph Watson is a propagandist. Paul Joseph Watson tends to be quite factual, though, on many of his positions and many of his videos. But Tim is neither of those. And he tries to, he jokes about being a milquetoast fence sitter. He just came out as a Trump supporter very recently. And he wouldn't be one before that. He covers this over and over and over again. All the voter fraud, the Democrats wanting to, right here, mail-in voter fraud confirmed. That was just yesterday. Trump bans ideologies. That was a brilliant move by Trump, by the way, because we cannot have that in the United States. We cannot have people saying that the very founding of our nation, of freedom and liberty, of European English common law, based out of Christianity and classical liberalism, is evil. You know what's evil? You know what is absolutely evil? Tyranny, dictatorship, communism, socialism, fascism. That is evil. It's destructive. And I mean, it truly, it's evil. It comes from the devil. It comes from a dark place in your heart. So, anyways, Democrats leaving the party in droves over and over again. Of course, all these titles are bombastic. They have to be, right? Dan Bongino, though. Dan Bongino. He's kind of mainstream as far as, Fox News, but kind of mainstream. Who's the puppet master behind this? Democrats are calling for a street fight, the coming coup. They admitted election chaos is the plan, exposing the left, disturbing plans for election. And then polls are being suppressed and so forth and so on. No, I'm not saying Dan has every take right or anything like that, but Dan was in the Secret Service for a long time. He knows a thing or two. He knows the inside. And believe it or not, I know how these things work because I know the inside. I know a thing or two. I've talked to plenty of these people. I've done my research. I've worked in government. I observe, I watch, I see how these things go. Stop burying your head in the sand, people. Realize what is going on. Fight for this country. And I don't mean out in the streets. I mean in who you vote for and who you speak up for. And speak up. Quit being silent. Quit being afraid. But also, be smart and prepare yourself. Literally, prepare. Because bad things are coming down the pipe. And unfortunately, Biden-Harris, there won't be law and order. There'll be more riots. Remember, during the Obama administration, there was Occupy Wall Street. During the Obama administration, there were multiple riots across the nation. Most of them were suppressed by the mainstream news. If you're not aware that riots happen in Anaheim, it's because the mainstream news never covered it. But I've been watching guys like Tim Pool for a very, very long time. I'm in the know. I pay attention. And it's not hard to do so. It's called don't be an ideologue. It's called check your biases. It's called seek the truth. It's called trust your own eyes. And hey, it's cool to listen to pundits. Take everything a pundit says with a grain of salt and do your own research. That's all you got to do, folks. So, anyways, with that, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have, spread the word out. I'll see you later if you want to come out to my live show. If you're watching this, on another night than the day I'm recording, then hey, check it out some other time. This has been AllMinucOne. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.